Have you ever considered how a system designed to help, one that aims to, heal and uplift the vulnerable, could actually start to undermine itself
Yeah.
from within,
hmm
not through some external attack, but through its own internal processes? That's the really powerful, almost stark image Ali Al Mokdad paints. He's a global strategic leader.
Right.
And he talks about what he calls the Shadow Shaping Epidemic, or SSE, in humanitarian and development aid.
It's a really compelling way to frame it, isn't it? Ali Al Mokdad describes this SSE as a kind of systemic organizational virus.
A virus. Wow.
One that silently and often, look, unintentionally, reshapes local non-governmental organizations, NGOs, right, into replicas of the bigger international ones.
So like clones.
Pretty much. His core argument is incredibly direct. He says, we can't keep applying yesterday's tools to today's realities and expect them to build tomorrow's solutions.
Okay.
So this deep dive, it's really all about exploring how current aid practices might be failing local organizations and, what that truly means for communities on the ground.
And the really exciting part, I think, is that Ali Al Mokdad doesn't just diagnose the problem, right?
No.
He also proposes a kind of vaccine against this epidemic.
The hypermodel.
Exactly, the hypermodel. This is about local NGOs building truly independent, adaptive, and sustainable models for themselves, essentially breaking free from these old restrictive cycles.
Right.
So our mission today is really to give you, our listener, a critical understanding of both these things, the problem and this potential path forward. We're aiming for those aha moments, and some practical insights into how the aid sector could actually be reimagined for real lasting impact and autonomy.
Okay, so let's unpack this shadow shaping epidemic, the systemic virus concept. When Ali Al Mokdad diagnoses SSE, he's pointing to international NGOs, NVOs, unintentionally, cloning local NGOs.
Okay.
The underlying dynamic is that instead of genuinely strengthening their unique local ways of working, the system pushes these organizations to copy Western models. So they end up replicating donor-centric structures and approaches.
And he's seen this himself across many countries.
Yeah, apparently across more than 40 countries, he's witnessed this pattern over and over. And when he says this isn't a glitch in the system, it is the system, that's a pretty provocative claim.
It really is. Is he saying it's malicious then?
Not necessarily malice, no. It's more that the inherent design and, the incentives of the current aid architecture have sort of naturally evolved to produce this outcome. Less a deliberate plot, more an unfortunate built-in consequence of how aid has traditionally worked.
Okay, I see. So what are the symptoms then? How does this virus manifest?
Well, you can see the symptoms pretty clearly. A primary one is what Ali calls forced standardization. He also terms it the programmatic clone effect.
Okay, programmatic clone effect. What's that?
It's where local programs get rewired, essentially, to fit donor expectations and maybe even foreign policy interests, the outcome. You get projects that might tick all the boxes for funding, look great on paper,
Right.
but often don't truly reflect local realities or actual needs because they're designed to fit that external template.
So it's less about genuine community-driven solutions and more about fitting into a kind of preconceived mold.
Exactly. And compounding that, we often see what he calls governance takeover or rigid bureaucracy implants.
Rigid bureaucracy implants. Okay.
Yeah, this happens when NGOs impose these northern-style governance models, layering hierarchies, complex compliance mechanisms onto what were maybe once quite agile community-led organizations.
And the focus shifts then.
Right. It subtly shifts away from actual impact on the ground towards just managing administrative structures and, endless reporting.
Yeah, the paperwork.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of administrative structures, that leads right into administrative overload. He calls it drowning in NGO paperwork.
I can imagine.
Local organizations often find themselves just buried under excessive reporting requirements. Just to give you some context, UN agencies, for example, they typically demand like 6 to 8 reports per year. Institutional donors, maybe 2 to 6.
That's a lot of reports.
It is. And imagine your organization spending 80%, 80, of its support budget just on reporting, not on actually delivering aid.
80%.
That's what one study in Chad found in an INGO program. It's staggering.
Wow.
And it gets worse. Every time funds pass through another layer in the funding chain, there's a hidden cost, right? Transaction costs grow. Even direct grants, they can lose maybe 11% overhead, and that jumps to 14% with just 2 links in the chain.
It's like a tax just for moving the money.
Pretty much. A tax just to get the money where it actually needs to go.
It's incredible how much effort gets diverted from, direct impact to simply managing compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess what's even more damaging is that this administrative burden often leads to a really profound loss of identity, right? Or what Ali calls cultural and operational erosion for these local groups.
Exactly. To survive, local NGOs start mirroring their funders, their branding, using English, even if it's not the local language, adopting priorities that aren't truly their own.
Which sidelines local knowledge.
Absolutely. It sidelines invaluable local knowledge. And in some cases, it can even create safety risks if they appear too aligned with Western actors in their own communities.
That's a serious consequence.
It really is. And this loss of identity is tightly linked to the autonomy stranglehold or the loss of decision-making power.
Meaning they can't make their own calls.
Well, decisions that should maybe take hours in a crisis, right? They get bogged down in these slow approval chains that can last weeks, sometimes even months.
Weeks or months.
Yeah.
In a crisis.
Yeah. Compliance becomes the absolute priority over real-time responsiveness, even when lives might be at stake.
Which you can imagine just stifles any kind of creativity or adaptation.
Totally. This leads straight to innovation collapse. Ali calls it the death of local creativity.
The death of local creativity.
Yeah. When there's so much pressure just to adopt these external best practices, any indigenous solutions, any context-specific models, they just get overlooked or pushed aside.
So the sector ends up valuing replication over actual transformation.
That's the dynamic. And perhaps one of the most insidious parts, there's the talent drain.
Talent drain, what's that?
NGOs, with their bigger budgets, often poach the most skilled local staff by offering higher salaries.
Ah, okay. I see.
Which leaves the local NGOs weaker, right? And reliant on these larger organizations, not just for funding, but now for human capital, too. It just perpetuates the dependency cycle, makes it harder for local groups to build their own leadership capacity.
And what happens if local organizations try to push back or speak up about this?
Well, that's where censorship and fear comes in. They often self-censor. They worry about funding cuts or, being blacklisted.
Then stay quiet.
It creates what Ali calls a manufactured silence, which only reinforces the whole shadow shaping epidemic. It's a really vicious cycle that shuts down dissent and any kind of honest feedback.
Okay, so we've talked about the symptoms.
Yeah.
What about the underlying conditions, like the funding realities?
Right. The economics and history are crucial here, these numbers. They don't just show a funding gap. They reveal a kind of systemic resistance to true localization. Despite years of commitments like the grand bargain, the aid sector's financial bloodstream, it still prioritizes its own mechanisms over direct community empowerment. Think about it this way. Out of every dollar meant for global humanitarian aid, barely 4.5 cents, 4.5% actually made it directly to local groups in 2023.
Only 4.5%.
Directly. Yeah. And from the organizations actually signed up to the Grand Bargain that initiative meant to boost localization, the verifiable direct funding figure was even lower, a mere 0.6%.
0.6%.
And 1.2% in 2022, according to other reports.
Wow.
It's not just inefficiency. It's about a deeply ingrained power dynamic.
That's truly sobering. And it's not just about direct funding, is it? You mentioned tied aid earlier.
Exactly. A significant chunk of aid, on average 16% of OECD aid since 2012, is tied. That means the money circles right back to firms in the donor country, not directly to frontline communities.
16%. That's huge. How much money are we talking?
Well, in 2021 alone, that was around $175 billion. And there are concrete examples, like Easterly's work in Nigeria showed over 20% of one agricultural aid project was spent on expatriate staff and training rather than, directly supporting the local farmers.
So the money isn't even necessarily staying in the country. It's meant to help.
Often, a significant portion isn't. And looking ahead, the financial outlook is, well, it's pretty grim. The OECD and McKinsey are warning that global official development assistance, ODA, could fall by 15 to 22% between 2024 and 2025.
Wow, that's a massive cut.
It's a potential loss of $41 to $60 billion. And we've already seen examples like the U.S. halting funding for, I think it was 83% of its U.S. aid programs recently.
Yeah, budgets are shrinking too.
Right. And this isn't entirely new either. Aid has always carried strategic weight, from U.S. aid to Taiwan during the Cold War to even colonial administrations back in the day using things like famine relief as a kind of laboratory for humanitarian techniques.
So it's rarely just about pure benevolence. There are often strategic interests tangled up in it.
Almost always. But what's fascinating, despite all these deep-seated issues, is that communities clearly prefer locally led efforts when they can get them. A UNHCR survey back in 2019 found that 96% of national NGOs rated their partnership with UNHCR as good or excellent.
96%. That's high.
Very high. Compare that to 81% rating their partnerships with NGOs as good or excellent. Still decent, but a noticeable difference.
But the dependency is still there.
Oh, yeah, dependency runs deep. The same survey showed 50% of these national NGOs still relied on UNHCR for their budgets and compliance stuff. It eats up like 15% of their management time for what might only be 3% of their overall funding in some cases.
Wow. So much effort for relatively little return and still dependent.
It raises that important question. What do people on the ground, the ones actually working in these local NGOs, truly feel about this whole system?
Yeah, what are they saying?
Well, we have some really powerful quotes, voices from the field that echo these concerns. Amada Smesem describes this push for change as disruptive, inspiring, maybe even dangerous to the status quo.
Dangerous to the status quo.
Provocative. And Joe Abu Naim is even more direct. He says, localization is meaningless if it comes at the cost of identity and self-determination. And he goes further, asserting that aid has become a polished lie, a tool for control that sustains dependency while pretending to dismantle it.
Wow. A polished lie. Those are incredibly strong statements. Really highlights the frustration.
Deep frustration, yeah. And Ahmad Al-Shab adds that many LNGOs today mirror NGOs in structures and salaries shaped into mini NGOs rather than true local leaders.
Mini NGOs. So back to that cloning idea.
Exactly. And Greg Jack points out that core contradiction keeping the cycle going. Donors want innovation but refuse to accept any financial risk. That contradiction keeps us trapped.
Right. You can't have real innovation without some risk.
Precisely. And Margit van Messel makes a great point, observing that what you're describing has been called Engedization for years, reshaping grassroots groups into donor-shaped entities.
And gangization. So this isn't a brand new phenomenon.
No, these voices really underscore that this isn't new, but maybe it's an intensifying crisis of identity and, frankly, efficacy within the aid sector. It's been building for a long time.
Okay, so we've really dissected how this organism, the aid sector, has been getting sick from within. Right. Its own cells replicating in this standardized way, not a diverse, healthy way.
That's a good analogy.
But now let's talk about the antidote, the path to healing. Ali calls it the hyper model. What is that exactly?
Right, the hyper model. He presents it as a fundamental restructuring for local NGOs, really aimed at achieving full autonomy. It prioritizes 3 core pillars.
Okay, what are they?
First, financial immunity. That means building income streams beyond just grants. Second, governance resilience, shifting power back to communities, using lean, agile decision-making. And third, operational adaptability. Structuring the organization for agility so it can scale or merge or pivot as needed without being locked into one rigid form.
So building in resilience and independence from the start, making innovation the foundation, not just an add-on.
Exactly. It's about breaking free from that donor-driven, contract-driven situation. And Ali has observed these models already emerging in different forms. He talks about specific vaccine strains, if you will.
Vaccine strains, I like that. Give us some examples.
Okay, one example is community interest companies, or CICs. These are basically hybrid models. They have a nonprofit spirit, but they can generate profit. And critically, they reinvest those profits directly back into their social impact mission.
So like a social enterprise.
Very much so.
Yeah.
And this legal structure actually exists in places like the UK, Kenya, Jordan. It allows organizations to pursue social good and generate their own income, moving beyond that traditional grant cycle dependency.
That really tackles the financial immunity piece head-on, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Turning the NGO into something more self-sustaining.
Absolutely. Another vaccine strain is shifting focus to become think tanks and policy influencers.
Okay, how does that work?
Instead of only delivering direct services, some NGOs are moving towards research and advocacy. They work to influence systemic change. So, for example, they might research governance issues or digitalization trends and then engage directly with diplomats, policymakers, universities, using their data to support better decisions. This often reduces their own operational costs, too, because they're focusing on impact at a higher systemic level.
Interesting. So leveraging knowledge instead of just direct action.
Precisely. Then we're also seeing membership and subscription models gaining traction.
Like a Patreon for NGOs.
Sort of. It's where organizations create continuous financial support directly from the communities they serve, or from supporters through recurring contributions. Think local sports clubs, maybe reading clubs, or even digital platforms offering exclusive content for a fee.
Okay, so it creates a steady, community-driven income stream. Fosters ownership, too, I bet.
Definitely fosters ownership and independence. And then there's fee-for-service models. This is where NGOs monetize their existing expertise.
How so?
An organization might offer, say, paid professional development workshops or strategic consulting, maybe even seconding their staff to other organizations for a fee.
Right.
They use that income then to fund their core community projects. So imagine a group trains others on leadership or crisis management and uses the revenue from that training to directly support their community programs. They're turning their knowledge into a revenue stream.
That's clever, making their expertise work for them financially.
Yeah. And another powerful tool, especially for efficiency, is joint programs and shared operations.
So, teaming up.
Exactly. Instead of everyone duplicating efforts, organizations merge administrative functions or logistics or technical teams. They might co-locate offices or integrate specific programs.
To optimize costs and impact.
Right.
Yeah.
It avoids wasted resources, leverages shared strengths, makes the most of every dollar, every bit of effort.
That makes a lot of sense. What else is emerging?
This next one is fascinating because it shifts how we think about funding entirely. Impact investment-backed NGOs.
Impact investing.
Okay.
Tell me more.
This is about attracting actual investors, people or funds, looking for measurable social returns alongside financial ones, maybe. It moves beyond traditional charity to investment.
So investors putting money into NGOs, what kind of things?
You might see investor support for producing and distributing solar panels for climate action run by an NGO structure, or launching education enterprises like learning centers that charge fees or operate on contracts.
What do investors look for in these cases?
Key things are usually innovation as a core element, not just a side project, clear potential for scaling up, evidence of market fit, like is there real demand, and of course a competent team to execute. It's a real market-driven approach to social good.
A very different model. Seems like a big shift.
It is. And finally, sometimes the most radical shift is actually a return to the roots. Volunteer-based models.
Going back to basics.
Yeah, some organizations are consciously shifting back to really lean, community-driven operations where most people involved are volunteers. They recognize the inherent sustainability and deep community connection that comes with that. Some are even moving towards being fully volunteer-based, maybe with just 1 or 2 paid focal points.
Which drastically cuts overheads, I imagine.
Hugely. And it recenters the action right back in the community.
Okay, so those are some really interesting models. But how does an existing NGO actually make this shift? It sounds daunting.
It can be. Ali Al Mokdad sees 2 main paths emerging for breaking free. First, there's the move fast and break things approach.
Sounds disruptive.
It is. It involves dismantling old structures pretty much overnight, taking big risks, maybe leveraging new tech like AI or automation, or jumping into completely new funding models. He suggests this is more suited for NGOs already in crisis or maybe facing imminent collapse where slow change just isn't an option.
Okay, the radical path. What's the alternative?
The second is a more structured step-by-step approach. This involves more measured shifts. Pilot programs first, incremental changes to governance, slowly diversifying revenue streams over time.
More gradual.
Yeah, likely more suitable for organizations that are relatively stable but recognize they're inefficient and need to evolve strategically. But regardless of which path, Ali's message is really clear. Standing still is not an option. The worst choice is doing nothing.
The worst choice is doing nothing. That's a powerful call to action, isn't it? For everyone involved.
It's definitely. And it leads right into what he calls the antiviral protocol, basically. Specific calls to action for the entire aid ecosystem.
Okay, like who needs to do what?
Right. So for NGOs, the big international groups, it means challenging their own assumptions, rethinking strategy to really put localization at the core, not just as a side project. Stop the factory-like approach to capacity building and genuinely listen to local leaders, reassess what partnership truly means. And critically, he says, INEs need to replicate what is being done to them by their own donors, meaning ask for and give the same flexibility and trust they want themselves.
Interesting point. Turn the tables, in a way. What about the donors?
For donors, it means reassessing their own rules. They really need to ask themselves, are our standards, our requirements actually preventing local organizations from leading?
Good question.
This involves providing more unrestricted core funding, genuinely supporting alternative models like social enterprises, and focusing way more on measurable outcomes rather than just rigid activities and endless reporting.
Shifting focus from process to results. Makes sense. And for the local NGOs themselves, what's their protocol?
For local NGOs, the message is empowerment. Question requirements, question assumptions, read the contract. Find their voice, reclaim their own narrative, connect with other experts, share experiences.
Don't just accept the status quo.
Exactly. He also suggests implementing zero-based budgeting for programs and operations.
Zero-based budgeting.
Yeah, meaning instead of just tweaking last year's budget, you build it from scratch every time, justifying every single expense. It forces you to rethink everything. And of course, explore these hypermodels, diversify revenue away from just grants, and crucially, feel confident acting as independent players, not just subcontractors waiting for instructions.
Okay. Anyone else in this protocol?
Yes, local governments. They also have a crucial role. They need to step up in rebalancing power by advocating for policies that genuinely support localized action and push for more direct funding to their own country's organizations.
To a whole system approach.
Absolutely. The overarching message from Ali Al Mokdad for everyone involved, donors, NGOs, local NGOs, governments, is basically optimization, optimization, optimization.
Keep refining, keep improving.
Yeah. It's about constant refinement, finding efficiencies, adapting to meet today's realities in the most impactful way possible.
Okay. So we've covered a lot. We've talked about the shadow shaping epidemic, this systemic issue where international aid inadvertently ends up cloning local NGOs, stripping them of identity, autonomy, innovation, and how that whole system is looking increasingly unsustainable.
A system in crisis, really.
But we've also explored the really transformative potential of this hypermodel idea, showing how local organizations are starting to forge these truly independent paths, building financial immunity, governance resilience, operational adaptability. It's quite hopeful, actually.
It is. It presents a potential way forward. It's definitely a critical moment for the aid sector and really for how global support is delivered altogether. As Ali Al Mokdad warns, quite starkly, if your NGO is not experimenting, it is already falling behind. Change will not wait.
That's a serious warning. Change will not wait. So this deep dive hopefully gives you, our listener, the context to understand these shifts and the real urgency behind them. And we really encourage you to consider your own role in, well, understanding and maybe even advocating for these kinds of changes, whether you're directly involved in aid or maybe just passionate about global issues. And perhaps think about how you might apply this kind of first principles thinking to other systems you encounter, in your own life,
That's a great point.
whether it's at work or in your community, maybe even just in your personal routines. Questioning assumptions, looking for more resilient, more equitable, more effective solutions. It's a skill that really extends far beyond just the aid sector, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's about constantly asking why and is there a better way?
Exactly. So engaging with this ongoing conversation about the future of global cooperation, the future of aid, it feels pretty essential for all of us, really.